Hey, welcome back to Narc Talk, a production of ANOA, Arizona Narcotic Officers Association. I'm Phil Hawk. With me today is Matt Shea again. Hey, and our question today, Matt, is why, there's all this talk about fentanyl. Fentanyl's always in the news, it seems like. So the question today is, why is fentanyl sold in a pill form, but most users smoke it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Phil. So as most of us know, fentanyl came on the scene. Now it's been almost 20 years where we really started seeing it. It really picked up 15 years ago. And when it first came in the United States, we really started seeing it as it was brought in by those drug trafficking organizations. Well, I should first say that, honestly, fentanyl was created in the United States and was first produced in clandestine laboratories in the United States. Fentanyl, like most of the other drugs, which was originally created as legitimate pharmaceutical or medical purposes and still is used to this day out of hospitals and in war zones for very good reasons. But unfortunately, the side effects of those products are they have an addictive nature to them, right?
Yeah, wasn't it like fentanyl lozenges or lollipops? I remember seeing those at one
Yeah,
time.
so they would have fentanyl. You could attach a fentanyl in a small patch, right? And it would go through your muscles and very small amounts of it, or they would call it a lollipop, basically, but a very small amount, which
it's usually for cancer patients and people that were kind of like the end of life type thing.
Yeah, or if you were seriously wounded in a war zone, they've started using it for that. Much like most of the other opiates and opioids that are out there, a lot of times we see big jumps in the different types of opioids during conflict times because they'll need a medicine that can be given to somebody that will almost immediately get them into a state where they can conduct surgery or stop them from having the pain, stabilize them. That's all important stuff. But all of those products turns out to also have, again, an addictive nature where you can start to have a substance abuse problem. And those people that will traffic, that seek to make money off of something like that, will focus on those items, and they find that as a product. Because if you have a product people can get addicted to, then you have a customer today. If you're going to sell people, I don't know, Legos, yeah, you got a customer that's going to buy Legos today. But if you can sell them something they're addicted to, I'm not saying people aren't necessarily addicted to Legos, but an opiate, then they have to come back to you. You're going to have a customer for life. What happened initially is once the drug trafficking organizations south of the border started to get introduced into the opiate scene, they've been into it for a long time, but back in 2010, the drug cartels out of Mexico became the #1 producer of heroin and importer of heroin into the United States. Once they got that customer base and they found fentanyl, they decided, obviously it's just easier to manufacture fentanyl. You only need a couple people versus hundreds to be able to do heroin from poppy fields. They can package it, produce it, pill press it with just a few people and make a massive amount of profit. And that's the goal of any of these drug trafficking organizations, any of these cartels, any criminal enterprise. Make profit and potentially off other people's misery, unfortunately. So cartels started making, basically, initially what they did was they counterfeited a very common opioid pill. It was the Mallinckrodt Pharmaceutical's M30 pill, which was a legitimate oxycodone pill, I believe it was. It was an oxycodone tablet. It was 30 milligrams. And it was blue, looked just like the M30s. So they started mimicking those, counterfeiting those. But instead of putting oxycodone, they put 2 milligrams of fentanyl. Started sending them up in the United States. Well, initially people were consuming those like you would consume any other pill. Eat it, swallow it. The problem is that 2 milligrams is how much an adult male that's of a regular size that they would consume without overdosing, and they would get maximum effects of the opiates. But it is difficult to get exactly 2 milligrams in each pill. So some of those would come in weak, and some of those would come in a little bit heavy, a little bit strong, right? So when people would swallow it, they would wait for the effect to happen. Now, whenever you consume a drug by swallowing it, it's got to go down into your liver, gets absorbed by the liver, and then eventually will get distributed into your bloodstream, cross what we call the blood-brain barrier, and then you get that effect. That can take, when you swallow something, 20 minutes up to 2 hours. Depends a lot on who you are, the size, what you've eaten, a variety of factors. So we'd have people that took a pill, and they're waiting 20 minutes, and they're not getting the effects that they desire, and they're like, it must have been a bummer pill. Must have been weak. They take another one. Well, once you've swallowed the pill, you've got it. So now this guy could overdose, and that happened a lot. We saw that a lot initially. A lot of people just overdosing because they were having too many pills. Okay. So they decided, a lot of folks started trying to smoke the pills. And initially when they started smoking the pills, it wasn't great because one of the coatings they had on the pill didn't work real well. It made an odd odor or a taste, I guess, when they were smoking it. So the cartels pivoted and they stopped making that coating. And a lot of pills started coming in and people could smoke it. So what they would do is generally, when you say smoke a pill, you might say, well, how the hell are they smoking a pill? Well, they would typically take a piece of tinfoil, put the pill on the tinfoil, and the counterfeit pharmaceutical pill, the M30, turns from a solid into a liquid and then into a vapor at a pretty low temperature, honestly. You just need to use a regular lighter to do so. So they put it on tinfoil, chase it around with a lighter. It causes it to start to melt. They'll put, most commonly, it'll be like a straw in their mouth, maybe a body of a pen, something along those lines. And they would chase that white smoke that was coming off it, kind of like they did with heroin back in the day.
Chasing the dragon.
Chasing the dragon, right? You remember that? And then they would consume that, and that allows them to get almost an instant result from it. They can feel it almost immediately in their brain, get their high, if you will, get the dopamine dump, get the euphoria, get the pain-numbing sensation which they're seeking. And they can also hypothetically regulate how much they're consuming. They believe they can understand how close they can get to overdosing without overdosing. Because when you're a serious user, that's kind of right, the razor's edge you want to get to is just before overdosing, when you get that maximum effect. And so that's why a lot of the people are smoking those pills. So with that, the cartels started, first they changed a little bit of the makeup of the pills, and then it became more and more popular because when you smoke something, it becomes even more addictive. So when you have a drug that has a very quick onset, which you get from smoking, and fentanyl is a quick onset drug in the first place, when you have a very quick onset and has a short half-life, in other words, it crashes down, what happens is the person, once it crashes down, they seek to get that high again, and they almost immediately begin to reuse. We saw that a lot during the crack cocaine days. You remember crack? Yep. Right? Crack's back.
Crack.
So crack had a short half-life, really quick onset, really quick offset, and it started to get had a lot of problems with crack cocaine, with people constantly wanting to reuse it. People would just waste their lives doing it. So we get that same thing now with people smoking pills. They're smoking the pills, they get very high real quick, they come off, they'll smoke the rest of the pill, high again. Now they want to go out and seek and get another pill. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the cartels because now they can sell more products. However, it also affected a little bit of their price, right? Because now they're going to produce a ton of it. And when, again, everything is about supply and demand, when there's a ton of supply in, the demand isn't quite so high, so then the price drops a little bit. So when fentanyl first started coming into Arizona to Metro Phoenix, when we first started seeing it, it was about $20 a pill, right?
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah. Now, somewhere around $2 and $3 a pill. So you can kind of tell, how many people are using it, how much is in town, and how much is coming in the United States, just simply by the price figure. At one point, the cartel kind of plateaued off with the amount of consumers they were getting, right? So what are they going to do there? Well, just like anybody else, think like Coke Zero, right? They're going to try and change it up. They're going to try and figure out, okay, maybe they'll like a different product. And I think that was to the credit of our legislature, the credit of the prevention folks and whatever else. I think a lot of information got out there that blue pills are bad, right? A lot of people saw it. You'd see it in signs. You'd see it in ads.
One pill can kill.
One pill will kill. Exactly right. So the cartel's like, okay, how do we get past that? We're not getting a lot of new people signing up for what we're selling. Well, let's change the color. Let's change a little bit of what it looks like, et cetera. So we started seeing these pills we would call Skittles, and all they really did was add a little coloring to it.
Colors.
Yeah, pastel
colors, exactly.
Yep. Pastels are pretty common for drugs. If you want to get a different set of users, you want to invade a different community with your drug, maybe even younger users.
Younger crowd, I was going to say younger crowd.
Younger crowd, make it more appealing, right? So pastel colors are pretty common to see in different types of drugs when they're engaging a younger crowd. So they tried that for a while. Those really didn't end up taking off, but they did get a lot of new users with that. And so the cartel tried, and the different organizations that are profiting from this tried a variety of other things. So they went on to do a rock fentanyl. So we have what we call Fetty Rock, or some people just simply call it Fetty, although that term's used interchangeable. So Fetty Rock was where they would bring now powdered fentanyl, kilos of powdered fentanyl coming up in the United States, and then mix it with a variety of things, and turn it into very much like a crack cocaine where you can smoke that out of a pipe, just like an old crack pipe. So now we're seeing a large amount of powder coming in the United States so that people can smoke it there. A bit of that is probably the cartel saying, why are we pressing pills if people are just smoking it? We can just send them powder. It's easier for us to just press into a kilo and send it up. It's easier for us to manufacture, to package, to hide it in a car or on a person or whatever else and get it up in the United States. It's harder for us. It's easier for us to keep track of that logistically. So now we're seeing where we would see hundreds of thousands of fentanyl pills, right? So I've been on, a lot of seizures where we'll get 10,000, 100,000, 700,000 fentanyl pills.
Yeah.
Now, while we still see some of those, now we're getting 20 kilos of fentanyl, 30 kilos of fentanyl.
Of powder.
Powdered fentanyl. So it's packaged powder. So you get the powder, and very much like cocaine, they can press it into a 2.2 pound package, square, and call it kilo. They'll put a stamp into it so they can kind of identify whose is whose or where it's supposed to go to and send it up to the United States. So kilos, right, if we're talking about just regular fentanyl, at 2 milligrams, 1 kilo, hypothetically, if it was pure, very rarely are they going to be pure, they're going to cut it.
Right.
But if it was pure, that's equivalent to 1 million pills when it comes to the amount of fentanyl.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts that can come up and be sustained, not only one coming up into the state of Arizona, but 20, 40 at a time, and that's just what we're seizing. There's different agencies out there seizing the similar
are
amount.
you seizing more powder now or pills?
There has been kind of a sea change. We're starting to see now more powder. We certainly are not for a lack of pills, but we're seeing a lot of variety in the pills. It has to do, we were talking about in a previous episode, where the cartel groups have splintered. They're having some infighting. That infighting has resulted in some change in the methods of manufacturing and a variety of other things that are going on there. They're always going to be trying to do different methods of manufacture, put in different adulterants or different cutting agents into their pills. And recently we've seen a pretty wide variety of that when it comes to pills. So we have seen a lot of that, but we're also seeing now more powder coming up because, fentanyl has really reached a limit now where we've got way more users than we ever thought would happen. So they're going to this is an easy way to get a massive amount up. And now if you've got people that are using it in different manners, smoking it as powder, which you could just put a line of powder. You could snort it if you wanted to.
Right.
You could inject. Fentanyl can be injected, but currently still smoking it is the way to go. So powder makes more sense with smoking it. And if you can rock up that powder, that's better for the cartel because, again, that gets it yet more addictive.
Cool.
When they do that, when they make that rock fentanyl, typically what we see there is people bring it into, so it comes up as a kilo or multiple kilos, obviously, but then it gets distributed to people who are going to rock it up. It goes into our houses in Metro Phoenix and Metro Tucson, up in Flagstaff, wherever else, or into different parts of the United States as it goes downstream. They take those kilos and then they will break them up and they'll mix them with other cutting agents and adulterants. We'll see them mixing with tramadol. We'll see them mixing it with heroin. We'll see methamphetamine, MDMA. You name it, whatever they want to mix it together. They're making cookies, right? So people that consume, put it in there. Bake it for a little bit in their kitchen. For a period of time. I actually know what the recipe is, but I'm not going to say what it is here.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that. But then break it into small rocks. Now you sell it. Now you have a very seriously addictive product and easy to transport. The odor is very difficult to detect, even for narcotic dogs. It's easy to be able to package up and send out, just like crack was and whatever else. And so we're seeing yet more of that, which is getting kind of crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, so a couple questions. Going back to the pills. So I remember back in the day, we'd get a boatload.
Sure.
And we thought that was crazy.
Right.
That's 1,000 pills, right? As a boat.
Yep.
And so the demand now for fentanyl must be crazy because what do they call now? Isn't it like, don't they have different names besides?
Yes.
A boat is like a sample, I guess, right?
You're right. So I remember when we first really started seeing fentanyl, and we would get 10 pills, and we thought, we just saved 10 lives. That was amazing. And it's true. We probably did save a number of lives doing that. And then we would come across this, it's right in between the size of a baseball and softball, a baggie, which is 1,000 pills. They would call it a boat. And at that time, boats were huge, right? And you would buy a boat for about $4 or $5 grand.
Oh, we'd take pictures
we got a boat.
Exactly.
We were seriously.
So
heroes.
does that mean the demand for it has just gone crazy?
Well, now they're selling.
So popular?
Yeah, now they're selling what they call boxes, or it's usually said in Spanish, caja. Is going to be the most common trafficked quantity. If you're going to do it on a kind of a local level or domestic level, is Kahas. So it's almost a kilo. It's just, it is essentially, it's going to be 1,000 grams worth. It's almost going to be 10,000 pills, about 9,000 pills,
wow.
a little under. And that is the most common amount sold. And that has to do with the price being so low now. Who wants to deal with a boat? If you're a major trafficker, you don't want to deal with, a boat's going for probably, if you're selling 1,000 pills, 70 cents to 60 cents a pill, so only $600 for a boat. Whereas the Caja, right, you can substantially more, 10 times that.
Right.
So if you're going to be a guy that's taking the risks of transporting, trafficking, all these other things, you're going to do larger quantities, which is unfortunately just horrible for society as a whole.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's commonly what we're seeing now is the box.
That's crazy.
Yes, sir.
And then, hey, let me ask you one more thing. Heroin. So are we not seeing heroin anymore? It's very rare in terms of law enforcement seizing heroin.
Yeah.
Is it because it's just so much easier for the cartels to make the fentanyl and make money off that? Like you said, the heroin is a whole a more detailed process. Like you said, you got to grow the poppies, you got to cut them, you got to all that stuff. So are you seeing heroin at all?
We still see heroin.
Okay.
But we don't see it anywhere near as much as we used to. So what we'll see is we will see people that will simply never go to fentanyl. And they will always use heroin.
Okay.
I call them purists. I don't know exactly what we'll call it, but people that just prefer heroin. In addition, the cartels have an investment in heroin itself. So again, back in about 2010 is where the cartels really made a major investment in the poppy fields.
Right. I remember
back
that.
then, the U.S. switched. We were now making the best marijuana in the world, and Mexico kind of lost that as a product. And they had these fields that they used to use
for marijuana.
Yeah. They were hectares, just giant areas for marijuana. Well, in a lot of the low-reaching hills and smaller mountain areas in Mexico, it's a great place to grow poppies. And so they just raised those fields. They cut the marijuana fields down, and they planted poppies there. Poppies it's a product that takes a lot of manpower,
right.
But it produces a natural opiate. And you can take that natural opiate and produce that into heroin pretty quickly. Again, it takes a lot of work, but work's cheap down there. So they can still produce it. They still have people that like it, and they'll use that as an adulterant or cutting agent to fentanyl. So it'll still come up. It's a pretty stable product to sell, whereas fentanyl, you've got your ups and downs when it comes to purity and how people like it. And hey, this tasted bad. You made this, and I didn't like this. Heroin is stable. Yep. So we still see it. I think you could probably safely say that we're seeing less of it now, but it's not, unfortunately, due to a law enforcement presence or success story. It happens to do with a failure because fentanyl has just taken over the market.
A new hot item.
Yeah. But yeah, we still see it. We'll usually see heroin come up in burrito-sized products like this. They'll be about between a pound and a kilo each, so between 1 and 2.2 pounds each, and we'll still see that coming up. And mixed in with other products or just sold by itself.
Well, great answer, man. I appreciate that. I mean, that really explains why we're still seeing pills, but the most common use of fentanyl is smoking it. So appreciate that. So, hey, thanks for hanging out with us again on Narc Talk. I'm Phil Hawk. This is Matt Shea. Any questions, get a hold of us at podcast@aznoa.org. And stay safe and stay strong.